In this video, I'm going to show you 3 techniques on how you can track forms with the help of Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. All and more coming up. Hey there and welcome back to another video of MeasureSchool.com, teaching you the data-driven way of digital marketing. My name is Julian and today I'm going to show you 3 techniques on how to track forms with the help of Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. Why 3 different techniques? Well, there are always multiple techniques to get to the data that you want. You shouldn't be discouraged when one or the other techniques doesn't work. You always need to be flexible, know about the capabilities of the tool and be able to test different tracking techniques so you get the data that you need in your system. This holds especially true for forms because there are many shapes and sizes of forms out there and different technologies, and sometimes the trigger or the techniques that I show you in these videos don't work. So you need to stay flexible and know about these different tracking techniques. Today I'm going to show you my 3 tracking techniques that I most often use when it comes to forms, when one or the other doesn't work. It depends always on the case, and we got lots to cover, so let's dive in.
Alright, back in our demo shop here we have contact forms, and the first thing that you need to do in order to find out which tracking technique you want to use is to actually go through the form and figure out what will be the success that you want to track. On the form, it's usually the form submit, so the user goes through the form just like this and enters the message. So let's click on this button and see what happens. In this case, I get redirected to a success page, and you want to track these kind of interactions. If there's a clear success page here and the URL up here actually changes, we can use that inside of Google Analytics to track this already. Because inside of Google Analytics, if we have it deployed, and I have this here on my page already, then you will get that data about the page view inside of your Google Analytics account already, and you can just classify this as a goal conversion. So every time somebody goes to this page, this will actually be a conversion within Google Analytics. All you need to do is go over to your admin section here under the goals. You can come up with a new goal, and we have different templates here. I usually go with the custom template, and we need to give this all a name. So there's a contact us submit. Choose a goal slot ID and the type of goal that you want to input. In our case, this is a page view that we want to classify, and that's why we will go with destination goal here. So let's click on this and continue. And then we have to enter either the URL directly, so equals to. In our case, that would be this URL right here. Be aware that you don't want to put in the full URL, just the page path that comes after your domain, and that should already do it. Now, I usually choose a different type of matching option here. I usually go with the regular expressions. It's very powerful. We did a video on this as well. If you want to get a little bit more sophisticated with your tracking and cover different cases and matching options, then I'd recommend to check out regular expressions. But for us, equals to will also work for now. Let's verify this goal first of all by clicking on it. It says 0% conversion rate. That is usually not a good sign, but since this is a demo account, we don't really have much data in here. So another way to test this is actually just save this for now. And then let's go back to our real-time reporting here and go under the conversions. Now that we are on this tab, we can again go back to our form and go through another conversion here and see if we get any kind of form submit inside of our conversion section here. And here we go, we get a new contact us submit, so our goal works, and we would be able to view that in all of our reports later on as a goal conversion. So it doesn't always have to be complicated when it comes to forms and tracking the form success. If you have a success page right after the form submit, I would always take this as a clear sign that the user has taken the action that I wanted him to take, converted, and therefore I would fire my tag or set up such a goal conversion inside of the tool. By the way, we could also do this in Facebook by choosing custom conversions and just choosing the path as well. But it gets more tricky. So in this second contact form that we have right here, let's again go through this form and send this off. And we see we are redirected to a success page, but the URL up here doesn't really change, and we just get a message that this was submitted successfully. So we can't really use that same method that we just used with Google Analytics and the page view tracking. We would actually need to build something into Google Tag Manager to make this work. And one of the methods is to use the built-in form submit trigger to pick up the interaction of sending of the form. How does that work? Well, in Google Tag Manager itself, you can go to triggers right here and create a new trigger. And this new trigger is our form trigger. As the configurations, when we click on here, we can choose the different interactions that we want to fire our tag on. We want to go with the form submission trigger. And for now, we'll leave this all unchecked and as default. And as it is right now, just to try it out, we go onto the save button. And one last step before we try this out is actually go into our variables and activating our form variables, which you can do under the built-in variables right here. Down here we have our form variables, which I would activate. Now you only have to do this once, and then those are activated. We can go to our preview and debug mode, go back to our page, and let's submit this form again. We should see our preview and debug mode down here, and let's pay attention to what happens in this little box down here once I press the send button. Now you see there is a submission inside of this box. Unfortunately, it redirected me to that second page right away, so I wasn't able to inspect it any further. There's several tricks that you can use. The one that I often refer to is just opening up this in a new tab by holding the Command or Control key pressed and then clicking on the send button. This will open up our success page in a new tab and leave our other tab untouched, which is really handy for looking into our form submit right here. So let's click on this form submit and then go to the variables. And here's where the built-in variables that we just activated come into play. We can inspect them and see how they get filled, what Google Tag Manager actually picks up from the form, and what information we could use to build a trigger of that and fire our tag. Now, it's important to remember that this should be unique to your form. So your GTM form submit doesn't trigger when another form, for example, the search form, is filled out. So just to show you this, we can actually have another field right here. This is our newsletter field. I'm gonna put in an email. This is another form on the same page, and I'm gonna press the sign up button here with the Command key pressed again. It will open up this in a new tab. So we have two form submits here, and we can compare them against each other, so we can look into how we can configure our trigger correctly to only fire on this form submit of our main form here, of our contact form 2. And if you go to the fourth and the fifth, back and forth, we see that one thing changes down here, and this is the form ID. So if there's a form ID available in your form, Google Tag Manager will try to pick that up and put that into your form variables, and we can use these variables to actually define our trigger a little bit narrower and filter down on this event. So this is really cool that we have this in our form ID. So let's go ahead and in Google Tag Manager turn our form trigger into a specific trigger that only fires on our Contact Us form. So this is a form trigger for our Contact Us form. And now we will install in these configurations a filter. And this is how you can do this. Click on some forms down here and then choose the variable that you want to filter down on. In our case, it would be the form ID. And then there are different matching options. I can just go with the contains option, for example, or the equals option that we have here as well. And I'm going to enter whatever was entered inside of this variable. This is Ninja Forms Form 1. Let's go back here and enter that right here. So now this trigger will turn true on our form submit of Ninja Forms Form 1 and not on the second one here, which is Ninja Forms Form 13. So you need to narrow that down, and then we can save this and attach it to a tag. Now, if you want to send this over to Google Analytics, for example, we would do this with an event because it's an interaction. It's not actually a page view. So I'm going to build an event tag here for our Contact Us submit. let's go ahead and use our Google Analytics tag here. And this will be an event. And this is a form submit for our contact us form. These are categories, action, and label that you need to fill out. If you want to, you can leave the label and the value field free. And then I'm going to select my Google Analytics settings variable. This defines where the data is sent to. And I'm going to define my trigger that we have already configured earlier. Let's save this. Refresh our preview and debug mode. Refresh our page. And now fill this out again. Press the command key and click on send. We here see our form submit and our Google Analytics event was fired to Google Analytics. We should be able to see this in our real-time reporting under events. Here we go. The form submit and the contact us has been transferred to Google Analytics. Now, if you wanted to build a goal again out of this inside of your admin section, you can go to your contact us submit form goal that we had and change the destination around to an event. And here is where you can enter the category. You don't have to actually fill this all out. You could just fill out this first one, but it needs to model whatever data gets sent over to Google Analytics. So in our case, when I click on this, let's look at the values again. It was form submit and action contact us. For example, I could take this action, just the action, and enter that here. You don't have to fill out the other ones if you want to stay dynamic when this goal fires. Now, when I save this, we have now changed our configurations. But when I go back and just submit this form again, click on send. In our real-time reporting under conversions, we should see a new goal conversion happening. So this is the second way to track forms with Google Tag Manager by using the form submit trigger. Now you might have seen these options that I've skipped over in the trigger section, which is wait for tags and check validation. Now you can read what they are all about. My experience with those checkboxes is that you need to be testing them and not tick them by default. So if your form now works and your conversion now is tracked, I would recommend to, if you want to try it out, to click on that button, check validation. It will give you another box here where you need to simply use your page path variable or page URL variable to tell Google Tag Manager when it should listen to these form submits. And maybe you don't want to listen on all pages, so you can contain this and say, okay, I only want to have this on the contact us page here. And then this check validation feature will be turned on this form, which means that if the user has entered something wrong, for example, not a valid email address, you usually get an error, and then you don't want to fire your tag. So you can prevent that with this functionality, but it doesn't always work for every form. It depends how the form is built, and therefore I would test this out before you turn this on by default. If this solves your problem, keep it checked. If it breaks your trigger and suddenly you don't get your form submit anymore, then I would turn this off. Same with the wait for tags option. Now, wait for tags is really an option to make sure that our event and all our tags have fired before the user actually gets redirected on to the next page. Usually a good option to tick, but again, I would thoroughly test this before deploying it. All right, now that we have looked at our form submit trigger, we get to our next case, which is our contact form 3. And when I fill out this form, instead of forwarding us on, it actually just gives us a success message down here. Now, we could use our GTM form submit. That is also a possibility because we have this form trigger already set up. But I want to show you another method on how to track this. Again, we can't go off the URL. We also don't want to use the form submit trigger. Maybe it has some problem or you don't even see that event inside of Google Tag Manager. Then you want to utilize the third method that I often use, which is the built-in element visibility trigger. Let's take a look at this in Google Tag Manager. We can go to triggers here and click on new. And under trigger configurations, this time want to take the element visibility trigger. what is this element visibility trigger all about? Well, as the name implies, this trigger actually would fire if something is visible on the screen to the user. The way it does this is inspects and observes the document object model and sees if there are any changes. So for example, if I click on this success message here, I can go into our developer tools by clicking on inspect. This is the Chrome developer tools. And here we can see the representation of the document object model. Now we can choose one of the elements that we think is changing during the page load. And frankly, you need to see the success message first and inspect it before you can actually build this out. And here we go. We can see that there is a div with the class WPCF7 mail sent OK, which is one of the nodes that get inserted when submit has happened successfully. Again, I just copied this. If I reload the page and we look at that same node here, then we notice that this success class looks differently because it actually gets changed once we fill out this form. So I'm going to click on the send button, pay attention to this div class. And we see in these little animations here that there was a different style appended, and there's also a new class mail sent OK appended to this. Now what we can do with our element visibility triggers, actually look at this element and make sure that our tag gets fired once this element changes. What we would need for this is a bit of CSS knowledge, because we need to tell Google Tag Manager which element it should be observing. In this case, you have the ability to use ID or the CSS selector. Since our node right here, our div node, doesn't have an ID, we would need to go with the CSS selector. What do you enter into the CSS selector field? And this is something we can actually try out inside of our JavaScript console. Here we have our console, and we can type in the command document.query selector, and then in parentheses and quotation marks we can enter a CSS selector and try this all out. Now in our case we had a div right here, right? So let's try out div, press enter, and we get the first div that is actually on the page, but that's not the div that we wanted to select. We wanted to select a specific one. In our case, this was with the class of WPCF7 mail sent OK. And you select such classes with the dot notation. So I'm going to put a div and then dot and put that class in the back here. Press enter, and we're going to hover over it, and we see it's exactly the element that I want to observe. So this is the right CSS selector to enter into my Google Tag Manager account here. Then we have further options. We have when should this actually trigger, only once per page, which could make sense, but in our case we can actually enter this multiple times. So let's go with the every time the element appears on screen option. How much of this needs to be visible? 50% is fine. So if it's at the edge of the screen, for example, it's not visible to the user, and therefore we still want to trigger our tag. And then we need to choose the observe DOM changes option. We get a little bit of a warning here, but it shouldn't affect too much of the page load time, but just be aware of that it can affect site performance. And we'll go with all elements that are selected by this element selector. Let's go ahead and give this all a name. It's a visibility trigger for our form success message. Let's save this, refresh our page, and let's connect this actually to our predefined tag that we already had in here. Our GA event contact form submit. We'll just switch out the trigger. You can do this down here, and let's get rid of the old trigger and connect it to the new trigger. Let's save this and refresh. Refresh our page. You can close this, and now I'm just going to submit this again, and I'm going to send this off, and we see we have IGTM as element visibility now inside of the preview and debug mode, and we see our Google Analytics event fired. Since we have set that up as a goal, we would also see a new conversion inside of Google Analytics. So this is the third method of installing form tracking with the help of Google Tag Manager and using the element visibility trigger.
Alright, so there you have it. This is how you can track forms with the help of Google Tag Manager and Google Analytics. These are just 3 tracking techniques that I showed you. There are multiple others out there like the Ajax listener, the history change listener, or building in a data layer pushed directly into the form. Those that I use most often and cover most of the cases. But I'd love to hear from you, which tracking technique do you most often use? Please leave me a comment down below. And also, if you haven't yet, then consider subscribing right over there, because we bring you new videos just like this one every week. Now, my name is Julian. Till next time.